further ado, we will start talking about sleep. So I want to start with just some data about autism and sleep. So it's estimated that 60 to 80% of kids or individuals diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder also have sleep difficulties. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have diagnosed sleep disorder, but they have sleep difficulties. And the number in parentheses there, the 40 to 45%, that is the amount of individuals neurotypical individuals and their rate of sleep difficulties. So as you can see, it can be upwards, in terms of like maybe twice as much in individuals diagnosed with autism. And for a diagnosed disorder like insomnia, it affects about 50 to 80% of those individuals, again, with those sleep difficulties, and that's about 3 times higher than the neurotypical population. About 15% of sleep is REM sleep in individuals diagnosed with autism. And again, for neurotypical individuals, REM sleep makes up about 20 to 25% of our sleep. And the reason that that is important is because during REM sleep is when our bodies will do a lot of restoration, healing, when we are in our deepest sleep, so we find it to be the most restful. So if you have a decreased amount of REM sleep, you might feel less rested when you wake, or it's less restorative, less healing in terms of your brain and body functions. So REM sleep is also important for learning and memory. It's that point in our sleep when our brain will kind of take the stuff out of our immediate short-term memory and transfer it into our long-term memory and kind of file it away, organize it in a way so that it can be easily accessed when we need that information. So again, if you have less amount of REM sleep, then your brain has less time to kind of go through that organizing and filing process of those longer term memories. And people with autism, it takes roughly 10 to 15 minutes longer than a neurotypical individual to fall asleep. And that the severity of autism symptoms are aligned with more severe sleep disturbances. So the more severe sleep disturbances, the more severe maybe behavioral concerns, or the more severe anxiety. The opposite is also true. So the more you have sleep disturbances, the higher rate of symptoms and the severity of those symptoms is going to increase. So you get into this loop where is the sleep leading to the increase in symptoms and severity of symptoms, or is the severity of symptoms leading to this sleep disturbances? All right, so why does this happen in people diagnosed with autism? So there's a handful of reasons that we're going to talk about. It could be sensory. Individuals diagnosed with autism often have sensory processing challenges, whether they're overstimulated or understimulated, if they are oversensitive to the sense of touch or sense of hearing, or if they're understimulated by that. So if you could imagine, if you are very, very sensitive to your sense of touch, laying in a bed or wherever you sleep, could be uncomfortable because more of your body is being touched by the mattress that you're laying on and the blankets and things that are covering you. On the reverse side of that, if the individual likes or needs more pressure and touch, things like that, they might have a hard time sleeping without a weighted blanket or something like that. If it's a sensory sound issue, if they're very sensitive to that, every little sound could disrupt their sleep cycle, making it more difficult to stay asleep, fall asleep, or stay in a very deep and restful sleep. So it could be sensory issues. It could be genetics. So there is a genetic component to autism. There's a lot of research, and science doesn't fully understand a lot of it at this point, but some of the genetic differences that they have found in people diagnosed with autism are similar to genetic differences that they find with people with various sleep challenges. So that could be an issue. Chemicals, hormones, neurotransmitters, all that various stuff that goes on in your brain and in your body um, is different to some degree in an individual diagnosed with autism than the neurotypical population. That being said, we're all a little bit different in terms of our hormones and our chemical makeup and things like that. But one of the interesting bits of research that I've seen is that for, how do I want to say this? Because I'm not a doctor. So, like the chemicals and hormones and things in our body that tell us, when we're getting tired, and so we're going to release some of these chemicals, and that kind of triggers our body to be like, oh, I need to go to sleep now. Those functions can be different in individuals diagnosed with autism, as well as things like natural melatonin levels, things that monitor brain waves, and things like release of adrenaline. So if you can imagine, if your heart's really pumping and you're full of adrenaline, you're like go, go, go all the time, that's going to make it a little harder to have quality sleep. So there's a lot of different things about chemicals and hormones and things like that that can affect sleep. So co-occurring medical or mental health conditions. So a lot of individuals diagnosed with autism might have some co-occurring anxiety, some obsessive compulsive tendencies, in terms of medical, maybe gastrointestinal issues, seizure disorders. So any of those co-occurring medical or mental health conditions are going to possibly impact sleep quality. If you're taking medication, there's always the possibility of the side effects of those medications disrupting sleep. And then the last two are kind of combined. So the communication and social environmental deficits. So as we know, individuals diagnosed with autism might not pick up on social cues, nonverbal cues, environmental cues in the same way as the neurotypical population. So I know that let's take an example. If I go to my friend's house and that you kind of see them, they're picking up in the kitchen, they brush their teeth, they put on their jammies. Like that's their way of saying like, Debbie, you need to go home. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. And they don't have to tell me that. I can pick up on those nonverbal kind of cues, those social cues that are going on around me to be like, oh, I've overstayed my welcome. It's time to go home. That's kind of an over exaggerated example. I would hope that any friend would just be like, Debbie, it's time to go home. And I wouldn't need to observe those social cues to get the point. But that I use this example to just kind of make an extreme situation to illustrate the point that there are things that we pick up on that maybe we don't even realize. Like, do we, when it's dark out, that's sleep time. Our body's natural way is like, oh, it's dark out, that means it's time to sleep. And someone diagnosed with autism their body might not pick up on that. Their body might not attribute dark overnight evening hours with sleep. Or the manner in which, other people around them, if someone's yawning or television programming, gets turned off and it just starts going into reruns, in the back of our mind somewhere, we might think to ourselves like, oh, You know, why are they showing all these reruns right now? Oh my goodness, I didn't realize how late it is. Normal television programming has ended. So just things like that. And I have found that, or I found some research, and I would love to learn more about this because it was really interesting, is that the more severe the communication deficits are in people diagnosed with autism, the more severe the sleep disturbances are. So, again, not a doctor, but I did find that research to be interesting. I'd be curious to see if anyone has any insight into that they might want to share, or if anyone has any ideas about why that might occur. If anybody wants to chime in, I'd be really interested to know. Okay, so when we talk about sleep disturbances, what actually are we talking about? Because it doesn't have to be a diagnosed sleep disorder to be a sleep disturbance. So we might be talking about someone having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Maybe they wake up too early in the morning or waking up repeatedly during the night. If they do wake up during the night, they have difficulty falling back to sleep. Excuse me. Possibly abnormal sleep wake patterns. So, generally speaking, people are awake the 16 hours, during the day from whatever, 7 o'clock in the morning till whatever time at night, and then they sleep during overnight hours. Someone who has abnormal sleep wake patterns, maybe they're awake for 4 hours, sleep for a half an hour, awake for 4 hours, sleep for a half an hour, or maybe their body is telling them to sleep during the day and be awake overnight. So those are just some examples of abnormal sleep wake patterns. I really have to tip my hat to anyone out there who does like overnight shift work, because that's really messes up your body's natural sleep wake patterns. So you get a lot of credit from me because I could not do that. I love my sleep. And insomnia, which is not sleeping, inability to sleep, or sleeping extremely small amounts. And then hypersomnia is the opposite of insomnia. So it's the need for excessive amounts of sleep. So if we are talking about, depending on the age of the kiddo we're talking about, if it's recommended they get 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night, maybe they need 12 to 14. And then the other thing that usually goes along with hypersomnia is that no matter how much sleep they're getting, they never really feel rested, which you can imagine why that would be problematic. If you sleep excessively and you still always feel tired, that's probably going to disturb your productivity, your concentration, your focus, your mood, and all of these types of things. So what are some of the impacts of these sleep disturbances that are common in individuals diagnosed with autism? So it could increase their sensitivity to stimuli. And hopefully tonight, and I did not plan this, but Amy, and I can't think of her last name, she's an occupational therapist. She'll be doing the sensory processing disorder webinar tonight. She'll be talking a lot more about some of the sensory issues. It definitely impacts your ability to focus and concentrate. So I know a lot of the kids and families that I've worked with have expressed concerns about their child's attention span, or you might see a lot of individuals diagnosed with autism who are also diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, or even without a formal diagnosis, maybe they can't sit and pay attention to something for more than 10, 15 minutes at a time. So that might not be associated with a co-occurring diagnosis of ADHD. It could be due to their sleep. Academic challenges, which are probably directly related to focus, concentration, attention span. If you're having those kind of difficulties in the classroom, then your academic performance and your behaviors and your mood at school are going to be impacted. So an increase in anxiety, weight gain. Interestingly enough, our bodies do burn a lot of fat and process a lot of food and all, just there's so many things that our bodies do when we sleep. So poor sleep quality can be attributed to weight gain, which is pretty interesting also. It's going to make people more irritable, more impulsive. Everybody, I'm sure, has heard the phrase like waking up on the wrong side of the bed. Usually we feel that way when we're not getting good quality sleep, or maybe our sleep has been disturbed. So you can just imagine if this is something that you're living your whole life with or impacts you every night, that you're going to be moody, you're going to be cranky, okay? It also increases the risk of accident or injury. Gosh forbid you're driving and you're very tired, or I don't know, I'm really accident prone. I'm just a klutz, so it makes it harder for me because I'm like, everything increases my risk of accident or injury. But it just makes it more likely that you might walk into something or trip over things because your attention, your concentration, your attention span, all these things are impacted by the decrease in sleep or the lack of quality sleep. You're going to have mood swings, the decreased awareness of social and environmental cues, the negative feedback loop, which we talked about at the beginning, which is just where you have an increase in the severity of symptoms associated with ASD that is going to impact the quality of sleep. And then the decreased quality of sleep is going to feed into more severe symptoms, whether it's behavioral challenges, sensory needs, anxiety, gastrointestinal, what's the word I'm looking for? Not, but gastrointestinal problems. So you get into this negative feedback loop, and so we have to stop that cycle somewhere. So if we can stop it during sleep, that is going to be beneficial for everyone. And then, of course, the big one that people always want to talk about the most is behavioral challenges. And if you put all of these bullet points here together and look at how sleep or sleep disturbances impact our lives, we can see how the behavioral challenges may occur. That being said, not all behavioral challenges are because of sleep. But if you can't figure out some of the root of some of the behavioral challenges that you might be experiencing, then maybe sleep would be a good thing to work on. So I'm going to pause for a minute now that we talked about sleep and disturbances to sleep before we get into improving sleep, so we can just see if there are questions. Oh, I see a long something here in the chat. A parent of a 15-year-old with autism and a family peer support specialist that serves many families of ASD kiddos. We have all noted the first 2 hours of the day when our children are woken up and are complete behavior nightmares. And when they wake on their own, it's not as bad, but still notably worse than the rest of the day. Any suggestions? Have tried sensory medication, time changes. As a side note, I and my families have all had, air quotes, normal sleep studies. So thank you for that question. I would say that when someone is waking naturally, as opposed to being woken up by an alarm clock or by a parent being like, hey, Bobby, come on, it's time to get up. You're going to be late for school. You're waking up at a better point in the sleep cycle. And maybe people don't know this, but there's various stages of sleep. So there's, and I don't know like the big medical terms for them, but there's like the light sleep, like when you first start to like doze off, and then you get into like a deeper sleep, and then eventually you get into REM sleep. And then once you go through a REM sleep cycle, then you kind of start back over again at like the light sleep, and then the medium sleep, the heavy sleep, and then the REM sleep. And these are cycles that we go through multiple times every night. So if someone's waking up naturally, it's most likely that they're waking up after a complete REM cycle during the lighter stages of sleep, which is ideal because if you wake up during a deeper sleep or during REM sleep, you might feel discombobulated, distorted. You might have to like, I don't even know how to explain it, like where you have to like snap out of it, where you just feel kind of weird and foggy. If I have a hard time explaining it, I can't imagine how someone diagnosed with autism would be able to explain it. So, but I think that everybody can kind of get the point of what I'm trying to talk about. I'm sure we've all had those experiences where we're just like, oh, like my body was just not like ready for this. This was not the right time for me to wake up kind of feeling. So in terms of always having behavioral issues in the morning, it could be a couple of things. Maybe the sleep wasn't restful enough. Maybe they needed more of it. Maybe they need to go to bed earlier. If they have to get up for school, I don't know if school's ever even going to be a thing anymore. I don't know. If there's a way to help them wake more naturally without something like an alarm clock, because alarm clock's pretty abrasive. It could offend their sensory needs to hear, like a loud beeping sound. So some ways that you could help someone to wake more naturally is by things that are like increasing the level of sound or light. So just like there's things like if you set a sleep timer on like a I do it on my podcast. So that after X amount of time, it will slowly start to fade out as I fall asleep. So it's not just an abrupt cutoff of the sound. So there are things like that that will do the opposite, like slowly increase in volume or slowly increase the brightness of the lights. So that might help to have a more natural waking cycle. A lot of things that I've also seen are related to the sensory needs of the kiddos. So if someone has a lot of need for like the proprioceptive or vestibular sensory input, so they need like that movement and the resistance and the heavy weight, that maybe they're not getting it, excuse me, in their sleep. So as soon as they wake up, they are extremely dysregulated in terms of their sensory needs. And then we're asking them to do things like have your breakfast, brush your teeth, go to school. And it's just starting them off on the wrong foot. So if you haven't done so, it might be helpful to get like a sensory evaluation completed. And I'm not talking about a regular OT, occupational therapy evaluation. There's a specific evaluation that they can do for sensory needs. It's like an OT assessment on crack. Like it's a much more advanced, in-depth, higher level of assessment. And based on some of those sensory needs that can be revealed through those assessments, it might help you to better understand some of what your kids' sensory needs are. And if adding some of that sensory input right off the bat in the morning might help them to kind of level out before you get to those behavioral challenges. Have you tried any sensory input in the mornings? I'm gonna wait and see if we get a typed response. Another thing could also be medications. So if they're taking their medications at certain times a day, and in the morning when they wake up before they take their medication, the amount of medication in their system is going to be at its lowest level. And therefore you might want to consider talking to your doctor about possibly adjusting some of the medication times to keep a more constant level of whatever type of medication, if they're taking any, in their bodies consistently, so it doesn't kind of ebb and flow so much. So those are some different things that you might consider to help with those morning behavioral challenges. All right, so, and if we get another question in the chat box, I will stop, but let's talk about ways to improve sleep. Oh, now we get the comment. Alicia, I will get back to your comments in a minute. I'm going to talk about improving sleep. So eliminating or reducing caffeine or sugar. I'm sure that all of our parents and us who are parents know that caffeine and sugar can definitely disrupt sleep. So let's try to cut some of that out. Fatty foods actually disrupt your sleep too. So if we can eliminate or reduce some of that or decrease the intake of it, have it not late at night, things like that, that's going to help. As age appropriate, reduce or eliminate nap time. I know sometimes I like to take a nap, but then I'll be up all night because I won't be able to fall asleep. So if we can stop the kids from taking naps or falling asleep when they should be awake, they're going to be more tired at bedtime and they will be able to have more quality sleep. No screens in the bedroom. A screen is a iPad, an Xbox, a cell phone, a television, a Chromebook, any of those things. And some people say, well, I use that because they have to have the TV on to fall asleep, or they have to have this, or they have to have that. If they need the sound, you can do the sound without having the screen. The screens, and again, I don't know all the science behind this, but there is research and evidence to show that the kind of light that is emitted from the screens does impact your ability to fall asleep, stay asleep, impacts your quality of sleep. Not just that, but it's a huge distraction. So if you're in your room watching TV, playing video games, chatting with your friends on the phone, it's going to be harder to fall asleep because you're not letting your mind and your body kind of wind down. Dietary changes. So some people, whether it's fatty foods, caffeine, sugar, but they can also be impacted by other things in their diet. They might have adverse reactions to gluten or food dyes or dairy products, even if they're not lactose intolerant. If you're sensitive to dairy, it's going to impact your digestive system, which is going to impact your sleep. Creating a bedtime or nighttime routine, which we're going to get into more in depth. And then gradual extinction of unhealthy sleep habits. So what that means is if your child is always falling asleep on the couch and then you carry them into bed, or if you have to lay next to them while they sleep, or if they're in your bed, gradual extinction means to slowly kind of wean them off of that behavior. So maybe when you start to see them falling asleep on the couch, you're getting them up and taking them to bed before they fully fall asleep. And if you're noticing that they're falling asleep on the couch at the same time every day, prompting them to go and lay in their bed before that occurs. And so you might need to do it little bits at a time, 5 minutes at a time, once a week, then twice a week, 3 times a week. And so gradual extinction. Nothing is black and white or all or nothing. And kids might, especially kids diagnosed with autism, might not respond well to a drastic change in things. Others might just prefer, like, it's this way or that way. It's A or B. There's no in between. But gradual extinction is going to be most beneficial for most kiddos, to just kind of slowly wean them off of that bad bedtime behavior. All right, so Alicia says, yes, we have done meds at different times, try to get energy out, etc. If he goes out on his own right away to be active, he is better. If I tell him, the ODD kicks in and it's more of a fight. I'm not clear on what you mean when you said if he goes out on his own right away to be active. So when he wakes up in the morning, if he goes out to like run around and play? Okay, so he'll go outside. If you tell him to. Okay. So if you tell him to, that makes me think that you are giving him verbal prompts. Um, I don't like to be talked to in the morning. Maybe try nonverbal prompts like picture cues, so like maybe just picture of outside so he knows to go outside. Um, or like if you have like a choice board, like these are two things you can do right now, and show it to him and let him pick one, and not giving him the verbal prompts because it might be the verbal prompt that is troublesome for him. I am thinking specifically about one family I was working with. The kid would have meltdowns, which is beside the point. I have a whole other discussion on meltdowns. But what was happening is when he was having the meltdowns, the mom was being too verbally engaged with him. So she'd be like, you know, do you need your weighted blanket? Do you want your crash bag? Do you want your teddy bear? Do you want this? Do you want that? What can I get for you? And it was just overwhelming him even more, and giving too many choices is like, oh well, now you have to pick something and I don't know what to pick because I don't really know what I need. And so she was overwhelming him with the prompts, and it was just making it worse. So we came up with a plan where she was just kind of somewhat distance from him so she could, he was 5, so you can't really just leave him alone. So she could see what was going on to make sure that he was, you know, safe, he wasn't hurting himself, he wasn't in any kind of danger. And then she would only give one verbal prompt, like, when you're ready, you know, you're, and I forget exactly what it was, that was like his preferred item when he would calm down, you know, it's right here when you're ready for it and when you need it. So when she was able to remove herself from that situation and stop giving those verbal prompts, it helped him to work through the situation, through the meltdown, more quickly. It didn't continue to escalate, and eventually the meltdowns were mostly eradicated. Not completely, but a whole lot less frequent. So that might be something to try, Alicia, is to just not give the verbal prompts, find another way with pictures, or maybe even have someone else give the verbal prompts. If I don't want to, this is going to sound mean, but is it you? Is it the way that you're saying? Is it saying it? Is it the tone of your voice? That doesn't mean you're doing or saying anything wrong, but the way that your voice and your directives being processed might not be ideal. So maybe there's a different way to prompt him. Excellent. I like a thumbs up. All right. And another way to improve sleep is anxiety reduction, which I feel like everybody needs, whether you're a good sleeper or a bad sleeper, whether you're ASD or not. So yoga is good for anxiety reduction, meditation, deep breathing exercises, white noise, which is like you can get sound machines that just kind of like play static, or the sound of rain or waterfalls, putting on a fan. Think about things like when you have like newborn babies a lot, like, you know, my mom many years ago, you know, would tell me stories about how like I had to hear the vacuum cleaner running in order to fall asleep. So those kinds of things are white noise. So maybe you can work some of these anxiety reduction techniques into the bedtime routine, which we're going to talk about more on the next slide. There are, and if you just Googled it, if you search like kids yoga, I have a set of kids yoga cards where each pose, each yoga pose is a different like sea creature. So it's like, we're going to do the octopus and the starfish, and it's not nearly as complex as like more advanced yoga is. And you want to practice these things because, like all good things in life, unless you're some kind of superstar, like it's not just going to come naturally to you. You can't just be like, I'm going to sit here and do a 5-minute meditation, then I'm never going to have any anxiety again. So you have to practice it. You have to do it regularly. You have to get good at it, and it will over time decrease anxiety. So the more you can reduce anxiety, the hopefully better the sleep quality is. Okay, so I'm going to pause again for a few seconds to see if there's any more questions that want to be thrown into the chat box, and also give me a chance to chug down some of my coffee, and then we'll talk about how to make a bedtime routine. Okay. All right, so you can see we have a little picture of like a bedtime like rewards chart here. So when you make a bedtime routine, and I'm not going to follow the slide in order. So let's just say you make a visual schedule. We've seen these in kids' classrooms. We see them maybe for what they need to do in the morning to get ready for school. So we need something, you might need something similar around bedtime or pre-bedtime routine. So do they need to take a bath or a shower, brushing their teeth, putting on their pajamas, laying in bed for X amount of time, lights out, or a quiet time, maybe if there's no screen time, you know, are they laying in bed doing a quiet activity like reading a book or something along those lines. Maybe, again, in that bedtime routine, you put a few minutes of yoga, or I have some things that I use called minute meditations, trying to keep a kid, I feel like trying to keep their attention on doing nothing for more than a minute is probably too long. So I have these little like minute meditations. So maybe you do one of those. Maybe, you know, if they have to, you know, get their stuff ready for school the next day, put all the stuff in their backpack, whatever it is in your house that you need to put in your bedtime routine, and kind of scheduling that out using pictures. And then depending on your household, you know, you can structure that however you want. If it's, you know, at 8 o'clock, we start the bedtime routine, and the expectation is at 9 o'clock, you have lights out. And as long as they do all the things on the schedule, you don't really care what order they do them in. Somebody else might need much more specific directions. So at 8 o'clock, we get in the bath. At 8:15, we get out of the bath. At 8:17, we're brushing our teeth. And they need that very rigid and structured kind of breakdown of all of the tasks. So there is, when is it? It's a two-part structure and routine discussion like this that I'm doing. I think the first one's on July 9th. And the second one's on the 15th, I think. And we're going to talk about how to create like these kind of visual schedules, structure and routine in your home. And then in the part 2, we're going to make sure everybody has all the stuff that they need to make their own picture schedule. And we're going to like kind of talk through it and put it together as a group of however many people sign up, so that we can kind of troubleshoot some of the problems that people experience when trying to develop those visual schedules. All right, Riam, I hope I said that right, had a question. My 4-year-old boy wakes up every night and starts crying real bad as if someone is beating him. Oh my goodness, that's horrible. He keeps crying like that for hours. I don't know why he is doing that. He seems good while going in the bed. He's been doing like this for a month. Why is he doing this, and how can you overcome it? Oh, wow. Well, I'm sorry that he's experiencing that. That sounds horrifying. So the first things I would want to know, is he diagnosed with autism or any other kind of disability? That would be the first thing I'd want to know. I'd also want to know if he's taken any medications, and if he has any, and you may or may not want to share, this is up to you, but if he has any kind of like trauma history, because those are things that I would think of that might make someone wake up in those kinds of terrifying states. And then I would say, based on your responses to those questions, you know, if you've ever talked to the doctor about this or gotten a sleep study because he might be having night terrors, GI issues, and the night terrors, Alicia just said. But because we're talking about something pretty severe here, like that level of screaming and crying, I would definitely tell you to talk to your pediatrician or your primary doctor. And I don't know if he's able to communicate with you, but is he able to tell you what he was experiencing when that happened in his sleep? Like if he was having a bad dream or if he physically doesn't feel well. Yeah, I might. He can't speak. Okay, he can't speak, but does he have other ways in which he communicates? Can't communicate at all. Okay. So I would say the first thing we need to do, well, I would say the first thing to do is to call his doctor because that's super concerning. And you definitely want to rule out anything that could be affecting his overall health, wellness, and safety to start with. Um, the second thing I want to say is kind of like we talked about before, where I said I'd be interested to learn more about how the communications deficits impact the sleep, because I did find research that indicated that, but it didn't really go into any explanation behind it. So I found that interesting. But there are ways that we could, or you could start to kind of teach your son how to communicate, even if he can't speak. But I feel like that is a more in-depth, probably one-on-one conversation that we could have outside of the discussion we're having now. Would you be receptive to me like emailing you to get more information so we could, talk about this more in depth? Excellent. That's why I keep my little notebook here. I'm gonna write your name down. I'm assuming when you registered, you had to type in your email address. So I can email you that way. Excellent. And I am sorry you are experiencing that. That sounds horrifying for him, and I can't even imagine being a parent. So yeah, I will email you and we can either set up a time to talk on like a video chat or a phone call, or we can just communicate via email. So thank you for your question. All right. So what else? Creating a sleep conducive environment. And everybody's sleep appropriate environment is going to be a little bit different. Generally speaking, we're talking about quiet, low lighting, minimal distractions, an appropriate temperature. Some people sleep hot, some people sleep cold. I'm a very warm sleeper, even in the middle of winter. I'm sticking my feet out of the bottom of the blanket because my feet get hot. I like to turn the temperature way down overnight. But depending on what your kids' needs are, is the kind of environment you want to create for them in their room. So, do they need a fan? Do they need an extra blanket if they always get cold? Do they need to wear like a mask to cover their eyes to help block out some natural light if they're waking up too early in the morning? Do you need to get the rest of your kids or other people in your house to do something else to keep the volume down so that they have that sleep conducive environment? Make sure it's sensory appropriate. No screens, no screens, no screens. I cannot emphasize that enough. A lot of the parents and families that I've worked with, getting screens away at bedtime is a battle. And sometimes, as all of us do, we just give in and say it's not worth the fight and they keep the screen. So not only is that going to disrupt their sleep and the quality of their sleep, but it's possible that they're then not getting enough sleep because they're up and they're on the device to, whatever ungodly hours at night. So if you can create that routine and physically remove the devices, it's like out of sight, out of mind. If you're just like, okay, well, as long as we don't use the device, we'll just leave it right here on your dresser. But then they see the device and then they're like, well, why can't I have it? Okay, so let's just take it, put it away somewhere out of their room. And then another thing that's really important is a consistent application of the routine. So let's just say in a two-parent household, if normally dad is home at bedtime and mom's at work, and dad consistently applies the bedtime routine, and then something happens and he gets called into work and mom's now putting the kids to bed, and mom says like, oh, no, we're going to bed early, or oh yeah, you can stay up and finish watching that, or a babysitter doesn't enforce the rules, or they stay the night at grandma's house and she lets them do whatever they want at bedtime. That's going to make the bedtime routine harder to enforce regularly and to have it be effective. So the bedtime routine should apply and be consistently applied no matter where they're sleeping, who's supervising, who's in charge, doesn't matter what day of the week, things like that. And you also want to try to have as much as possible, have like a consistent kind of sleep-wake cycle. So including times that you go to sleep and times that you wake up. Depending on the age of the kids that we're talking about, teenagers are going to be like, but it's the weekend, I don't have school in the morning, so I can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, if you do that, then you're going to sleep till noon. And if you sleep till noon, then you're not going to be able to go to sleep in a reasonable manner. And then you're going to, but you still have to get up. So now you're going to be overly tired, and then you're going to take a nap, and it just leads to this whole cycle. The other thing is that if kids learn that they can get away with something or break the rules and say, well, dad lets me have, the iPad in my bed and mom doesn't, then that's going to lead to behavioral challenges, because you're going to have more of a battle getting that iPad away, or, they're going to do splitting, like where they put one parent against the other, like, well, mom said or dad said, and, you're going to have challenges like that, which could result in a whole bunch of things like, now they're sneaking and they're lying about it because they're trying to do a workaround on the rules because they're not being enforced consistently. So maybe you have an hour or so leeway, like on the weekends, or sleeping in or staying up late. But if it's, Monday through Friday, we go to bed at this time, we get up at this time. I don't want to say there's never exceptions, because there's always exceptions, right? Like people have Christmas routines, the kids wake up at the crack of dawn, because they want to run downstairs and see if Santa came. You can't be, you're not going to be like, oh no, it's not time yet. We have to go back to bed, or, they have friends or family in from out of town. But for your average normal day, without any of those kind of extenuating circumstances, you want to try to keep the sleep routine and hours of sleep and wake as consistent as possible. Okay. There are possible medical things that we've touched on a little bit that can impact sleep. There are also medical things, medications, and other therapies that can be beneficial to aid sleep. So there's light therapy, which is, it's not like your normal, like, incandescent light bulbs or anything like that, just like the normal lights in your house. It's a specialized kind of light that can help kind of retrain the brain and the body and the chemicals that are being released in your brain to get the sleep-wake cycle more normalized. There's medications that can help with sleeping and waking. I hear a lot about melatonin, which I think can be bought over the counter, but I would still, especially if you have a kid who, is diagnosed with autism, who may also have other difficulties, challenges, medical conditions, I would still talk to your doctor, even if you can buy it over the counter, and what the side effects of that melatonin could be. You could have sleep studies. There's a couple different kinds of sleep studies. There's sleep studies that occur while you sleep, and then there's sleep studies that actually occur while you're awake. So those can be pretty invasive. They do have ones that you can do at home now, but a sleep study at a sleep doctor's office, you're in a room, it kind of looks like a hotel room, but you're hooked up to a whole bunch of things like on your head and chest, and it's pretty much monitoring all the things that are going on in your brain and in your body at the various stages of sleep. I had one done. It's a little uncomfortable, like with all this stuff stuck to you. I'd imagine a lot of kids are not going to be very receptive to this idea, and we're asking them to sleep in like a strange place. So I don't know how well received that would be, but it is an option if you feel like you need to go that route. And then underlying, medical issues. I know people with gastrointestinal issues, if they are having acid reflux or GERD, when they lay down at night, it's easier for like the acid in their stomach to push up because you don't have the gravity pulling it down like you do when you're standing. So they might need to have medication or a change of diet or something like that to help with some of the gastrointestinal distress. If they're having night terrors, if they are, I'm trying to think of, it seems like the biggest medical issue that impacts sleep is gastrointestinal. Migraine headaches can actually affect sleep, so that could be something. So whenever in doubt, talk to your doctor, talk to your pediatrician, tell them about what's going on in the sleep during hours of sleep, and hopefully they can help you figure it out. Never start or stop a medication or a therapy or anything without talking to the doctor. And just like medications, taking medications can have side effects that impact sleep. When you stop taking medication, it can also have an impact on your body and can affect your sleep. So that might be something to consider also. So that is the end of the presentation. So we have about 20 minutes for additional Q&A if people have questions, comments. Feel free to unmute yourself, type them in the chat box. I am going to share a link to the PowerPoint in the chat box for anyone who wants it, or I can email it to you, depending on what you prefer. That is the end of, I guess you could say, like the formal presentation. If people have to get on, they have other things to do, feel free. I'm not going to be offended or anything. But I will sit here and I will take questions if people want to wait till some other folks maybe leave so that they feel a little more comfortable. It is up to you, but I am here no matter what you decide. Okay, in the chat box, I just put the shareable link for the PowerPoint presentation. I think that's the one. I think I made a couple of minor edits to that one, and I didn't update it, but the general information is still there. I'm also going to stop recording if that is deterring any questions.